Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, we're diving straight into Wyoming's 2026 Senate race today. Harriet Hageman and James Byrd are your officially minted primary winners, Hageman taking the Republican nomination and Byrd securing the Democratic side. They are squaring off for the open Senate seat being left by retiring Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis. Now, you might be thinking, well, it's Wyoming. We know exactly how this ends. But hold on, because this race, it's about a lot more than just a single state's primary. We are looking at a contest that's going to send ripples across the entire national political landscape.
So let's just address the elephant in the room right out of the gate. Is Wyoming Senate seat already totally locked up for Republicans? I mean, Wyoming is famously one of the most reliably red states in America, right? At first glance, yeah, it looks pretty lopsided. But is it absolutely 100% a done deal? Or could November actually pull off a political surprise? Today, we are doing a data-driven dive into this exact battleground. We want to understand what's really at stake here, how the numbers shake out, and why you should absolutely be paying attention to this, regardless of what state you're voting in. Now, what's really interesting here is the massive registration gap. When we talk about national elections, we're usually obsessing over swing states and these tiny razor-thin margins. But Wyoming plays by a completely different set of rules. We are not looking at a normal down-to-the-wire contest. The Republican Party doesn't just have a slight edge, they've got this enormous structural Goliath of an advantage. In fact, they currently hold every single statewide elected office. Let's quantify exactly what that looks like on the ground.
If we look directly at the voter registration rolls from May 2026, the landscape is honestly staggering. We're talking nearly 210,000 registered Republicans compared to just under 31,000 Democrats. And sure, keep in mind that this data doesn't even factor in the state's unaffiliated voters, but wow, that major party split is just striking all on its own. For anyone analyzing this race, seeing these numbers makes the immediate challenge facing the Democratic Party crystal clear. It makes November a monumental uphill climb.
To really put that structural advantage into perspective for a second, that is basically 6.8 Republicans for every single Democrat in Wyoming. 6.8 to 1. Political strategists aren't looking at a traditional battleground here. They're looking at a deeply, deeply entrenched stronghold. Beating at nearly 7 to 1 disadvantage, that requires way more than just a good ad campaign or solid messaging. It literally demands an unprecedented shift in voter behavior just to make the race somewhat competitive.
And that brings us to our November 3rd general election matchup. In the Republican corner, we have the nominee, Harriet Hageman, who steps in as the heavy favorite, obviously given those demographics we just talked about. And on the Democratic side, we have James Byrd, taking on the role of the ultimate underdog. Both of these candidates are gearing up for the general right now, and the stark contrast between their campaigns, and frankly, their available resources is really going to shape Wyoming politics for the rest of this 2026 cycle.
Let's look at Harriet Hageman's political trajectory, because her rise has been remarkably fast and incredibly impactful. You probably remember 2022, right? She defeated high-profile incumbent Liz Cheney in the Republican primary. That was easily one of the biggest political stories of that entire election cycle. From there, she went on to easily win Wyoming's at-large House seat. And now, just a few short years later, she is running for retiring Cynthia Lummis's open Senate seat. She's bringing high national visibility, a very strong conservative identity, and the prominent endorsement of former President Donald Trump right along with her. You might be wondering, why make the jump so fast? Well, a U.S. Senate seat holds immense power. A senator has direct, long-term influence over massive national policies. We're talking tax policy, energy policy, judicial confirmations, national security, federal spending, the whole shebang. This isn't just some simple promotion across the Capitol building. It is a guaranteed 6-year position at the absolute center of national politics. It shapes not just where the Republican Party is headed, but the direction of the entire country.
Okay, let's pivot over to the Democratic counter case and look at the challenger, James Byrd. Byrd is bringing his own substantial political experience to the table here. He's a former Wyoming state representative from Cheyenne, and he actually served in the Wyoming House for a full decade, from 2009 all the way through 2019. So he has a long history of involvement in statewide politics. Now, yes, he is facing one of the absolute steepest general election challenges in American politics today, but listen, a difficult race isn't necessarily an irrelevant race. As the Democratic nominee, Byrd has this national platform now to make his case directly to the voters. The big question is whether he can turn that platform into a truly competitive campaign.
To really grasp the scale of Byrd's David versus Goliath challenge, we need to look at the timeline of Wyoming's political history. We know 2022 brought us Hageman's massive victory over Cheney, and 2026 gives us this open Senate seat. But
You actually have to go all the way back to 1977 to find the last time a Democratic U.S. senator was elected in Wyoming. 1977. The Democratic Party isn't just trying to overcome a gap in the polls right now, they are trying to break a political pattern that has lasted for nearly half a century. Building a coalition that can compete statewide under those conditions, that is a monumental task.
Just to colorfully illustrate exactly how long ago 1977 was, think about what America looked like the last time a Democrat won a Senate seat here. Jimmy Carter had literally just become president, the original Star Wars movie was playing in theaters for the very first time, and a little computer company named Apple had only recently been founded. Since that time, Wyoming has solidified into one of the most reliably Republican states in the exact country. The historical burden of proof on any challenger here is just enormous. Obviously, an upset isn't impossible, but history is heavily, heavily stacked against it.
Let's zoom out and see how this builds into the macro view, the 2026 Senate map. Because while Wyoming might seem like this really localized, isolated stronghold, it is actually deeply connected to the much larger story of the 2026 midterms. These elections are going to determine the ultimate balance of power in Washington. Literally every single Senate seat matters when control of the chamber is on the line. Just a few competitive races can dictate who holds the gavel.
So why does safe states even matter? Why focus on places with such massive polling gaps? Well, seemingly locked races matter strategically for a bunch of reasons. First, they determine the baseline chamber balance. Second, they direct where campaign money flows. Campaigns don't operate in a vacuum, right? If a party doesn't have to spend tens of millions of dollars defending a safe seat, that money moves directly to tighter races elsewhere. Third, these safe states drive national endorsements and narratives. And finally, all of this impacts the highly competitive swing states, places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and North Carolina. The voters in Wyoming are participating in the exact same national election environment as voters in those battlegrounds.
Because of that shared national environment, the true metric you're going to want to watch on election night isn't necessarily just who wins, but the final November margin. Let's look at the scenarios. If there's a massive, resounding Hageman win, it reinforces Wyoming as this impenetrable, safe GOP stronghold, signaling the Republican political machine is at peak strength. But, and this is a big but, if we see an unexpectedly tight margin, even if the Republican still wins, that sends a huge signal to national strategists. It suggests the political environment might be rapidly shifting in places where one party has traditionally dominated, and that completely changes how resources are allocated in the future. Which brings us to our final, defining question for this explainer. Can anyone seriously challenge the Republican grip on Wyoming's Senate seat? Harriet Hageman and James Byrd are officially locked in for their November showdown. That 6.8 to 1 registration advantage tells us exactly why Republicans begin with such a powerful head start. But, elections are decided by actual turnout, real issues, and shifting national conditions, not just historical data and registration forms. If voters are frustrated, shifts can happen. If this heavily Republican state somehow turns into a genuine Senate conversation, the implications are going to echo way beyond Wyoming's borders. We will all be watching closely on November 3rd to see just how firmly Republican this map truly is. Thanks for exploring this with me, and definitely keep your eyes on the margins.